So let's go ahead and get started. We've got a terrific number of folks that are in with us today. Thanks for joining us for day 3 of Will My Business Survive COVID-19? And as I mentioned earlier a few minutes ago, this is more than just simply for business owners, although they are the bread and butter. And that's certainly the backbone of Wealth Legacy Group and the Wealth Legacy family of companies. I'm RJ Kelly. I'm founder and chief visionary officer of the Wealth Legacy family of companies. And we've got clients in 19 states. We work primarily with business owners in a variety of different ways, from the consulting and their succession planning, advising them in terms of strategies if they're looking at selling a business or selling an appreciated asset, how to do that and either not pay tax at all or at least defer the tax recognition for 30 years. We also are in the insurance, life insurance and disability insurance space for, again, business and executives and professionals, as well as wealth management and investment management. So we've been having a lot of conversations with folks about when do things return to normal and when do we get back to Kansas. Toto and Dorothy, I don't think it's going to happen. But today we've got a remarkable panel, wonderful group. We've got one of our favorite county commissioners, county supervisors. We call them commissioners in Washington State, where I'm from. County supervisors, Krista Gaspar, who will be with us in a moment. State Senator Brian Jones, who's looking on with us and looking from his office here at home, and antsy to get back up to Sacramento and clank some heads together. So we'll be hearing from Brian. And then also Congressman Scott Peters, who is he's with us. We just can't see his picture right now, but remarkable group of elected officials. And some people might say, well, what can my elected officials do for me? And obviously, there's a whole lot that they can do for you. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about the money. Where do you go? Just show me the money. So we've got some experts on that will talk about not only the SBA programs for what's called the PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Plan, but there's also the emergency relief. There's also what are called microloans that up to $150,000 that many people and business owners don't know about. So you're going to want to come in and tune in on that tomorrow. And then Friday, it's going to be, when do we get back to normal? When, and normal in air quotes. So we'll be interviewing the chief medical officer for San Diego County. We call him Dr. Nick Ifantidis. You can see why we call him Dr. Nick. But remarkable leader. He's on a hotline with the White House regularly, and he'll be sharing with us in terms of when can we go back, when we get out of our homes, and what's that going to look like going forward. And we're also going to be talking about financially, where is this country from an economic standpoint, from an investment standpoint, what can we do, where can we invest? It's a turbulent market. When does that stop, if ever? So again, you're going to want to join us and be with us on Thursday and Friday. Let your friends, whether they're business owners or not, make sure that they are aware of this program. And that's how we can have as many as 500 people on the call. So I'm going to pivot over and let's see if I've got, ta-da, okay. I'm going to start showing screen here. And Kristen, are you with us here? If not, I've got a text here from Kevin. Thank you, Kevin. I'm glad you're with us. Brian, I'm not seeing that Kristen is with us yet, so I'm going to change our order and let's go ahead and.
Hey, RJ, we have her here.
Daniel.
I can get her on here if
okay.
you want me to. Here we go.
There we go. Perfect. All right. So we're going to.
I think she's here. Let's see if she can talk to us.
All right. And so let me do a quick introduction of my friend. There we go. Kristen Gaspar was elected to the San Diego County Board of Supervisors in 2016 after serving 4 years on the Encinitas City Council. And she served as the first elected mayor of Encinitas, which I love that. A great women leader. She's a wife, a mother, community leader, and small business owner. She worked as the CFO, Chief Financial Officer of her family's small business with 7 locations, employing nearly 150 San Diegans. And after having blown out my knee this last year, the importance of physical therapists is really high on my list. And so I'm grateful for what Kristen and Paul have in terms of a wonderful physical therapy company. 7 locations. Kristen's vision is to serve and care for the various parts of our community that some people have ignored. So that's led to the promotion of very innovative programs to help many of our most vulnerable citizens in the community, the elderly, the formerly incarcerated, and those that are struggling with mental health or addiction issues, as well as the homeless population. At the same time, she's a fiery advocate for taxpayers and also for keeping our community safe. She and Dr. Paul Gaspar, have 3 children, and they live in Encinitas. So please help me welcome one of our, frankly, in Wealth Legacy Group, one of our very favorite, inspirational, and tireless advocates for San Diego, and also a wonderful friend, Supervisor Kristen Gaspar. Susan, come be with us, Kristen.
Well, good morning, RJ. Good morning, everyone. It really is a pleasure to join you today. Sorry I had some technical issues, I think, going on pretty early in the call. I want to share with you that, hey, we are all in this together. I'm no exception. As you heard from my bio, I'm experiencing really the triple whammy right now. As a mother, I'm at home and overnight had to become a teacher to my children. I am a business person, as mentioned in my bio as well, with 150 employees. And for business owners out there, you know the burden that goes along with that. I worry each and every night, and it's kept us up night after night here since the pandemic hit San Diego County. I worry about how we're going to keep our doors open. We're considered an essential business, and so we are fortunate to be able to continue to operate at this time. But even when you can continue to operate at this time, it's likely the case that your business has taken a big hit. And I can share with you personally, almost overnight, we lost about 60% of our business. Our ultimate goal has been to keep people on payroll as long as possible, making sure that our employees have health insurance during this critical time. But that's no easy task. And so there are a lot of moving parts. And our big goal has been to focus on cash on hand at this point in time, because we know that this is going to carry on a lot longer than most people originally anticipated. So we're working really hard as a business. At the same time, my husband's an essential worker. I'm an essential worker. We can't be at home with our kids all day. I can't be that person that administers homeschooling for my children, for example. And so, you know, my kids have really had to step up to a new level of independence, but at the same time, they're 10, 12, and 14 years old, and they're really bored. So they can't wait for all of this to end. I want to share with you a little bit about the elected official component of my life as well, and what we saw early on, how we've been able to help the business community, and then really an ask for you as business owners, what we need from you at this time so that we can focus on post-pandemic. So it's careful triage, right? Our early attention was on the health and safety of our citizens. It remains to be the case, but there needs to be a focus at the same time on the health and wellness of our business community. And so we can be really proactive here. We can lay some wonderful groundwork during this time. This shouldn't be a downtime, even if your doors are closed. Our focus should be on how do we either keep your doors open for as long as possible, or how do we open them again post-pandemic? So very early on, when the governor had issued the stay-at-home orders, there was a great deal of confusion. People were wondering what that meant. They were wondering what it meant for their business. Were they part of this quote-unquote essential business or not? And so early on, my office was flooded with calls from the business community. And it was really a unique opportunity to talk to a variety of sectors all in one day. For example, I'd be on the phone 1 minute with the biotech community, the next minute with aerospace and defense, the very next minute with the golf course operators in San Diego. So it was really across the board an interesting time for all concerned. And what we were able to do was hear the reasons why people should be in that essential business category. We were able to then advocate for the business community back to the governor. Now, the governor's gone on to clarify orders, and over time, it's become clearer who is and is not part of that essential category. I want to communicate back to you today that it's not perfect, and we still need a great degree of advocacy up in the state legislature, in the governor's office, as we continue to clarify those orders. And we've been able to do that effectively through my office. Communication right now is key. My main message to you today is please don't assume that your elected officials understand anything about your business. And I know that's tough to take, but listen, my business is in physical therapy. I can't assume that a financial planner knows how to run a physical therapy office. So you need to understand that the communication with your elected officials is key to everything. Please don't assume we're too busy. This is exactly what we were elected to office to do, is to listen to our constituents. That includes the business community that's going to be essential to pull us out of all of this. You are the key to our workforce. And there are so many San Diegans that are going to be struggling because they're out of work currently. Please communicate early and often to our offices. This includes if you're part of an association where you have, membership in bulk. That's very helpful to hear from you. I've been able to do a variety of things, for example, with close communication with the Restaurant Association. There's a California chapter, but specifically there's a San Diego chapter. We know that our restaurant community has been hit the hardest, perhaps the hardest in this pandemic. There are a number of places that can stay open, of course, and you might assume they're okay, but they're not. They've taken big hits overnight. We've had about 60% of our businesses in the restaurant community close in San Diego County. Projections that many of those businesses will never open their doors again. So the restaurant community has been overly communicative with my office, which has been a real positive thing. It translated into board letters that I was able to put into motion now, was able to get passed now. Those board letters are relief efforts for the business community. We were able to lay that down early so that it's not a reaction, it's a proactive measure to help them. So in this example, we were able to do things that would reduce the burden on the restaurants once the pandemic has concluded and help them get their doors open and get government out of the way. So it made a lot of sense. So your boards are still meeting, they're still in session, whether it be a city council, whether it be your county government, Sacramento, DC, your elected officials are essential workers. They are working for you. Put them to work in the right ways. The only way for us to know is for you to communicate back to us. So I use the restaurants as one example, but there are all sorts of business sectors that are communicating with my office on a daily basis. I want to point to your attention to one important measure, property taxes. There have been a variety of relief measures that you're familiar with at the state, the federal level, and also the local level. But one big question on people's mind was that very big line item on everybody's budget, whether you be a resident or a business, and that's your property taxes. April 10th, kind of scary, just around the corner. For the very first time, we have a number of people who are unfamiliar with how they are going to write that big check come Friday. And they're concerned because these are the very individuals who have never been in default before on their property tax bill. So we started out with some advocacy with our treasurer tax collector, Dan McAllister. Pretty early on, it was determined that we needed help at the state level. So I was able to get one of my colleagues, Supervisor Jim Desmond, to broker a letter along with our treasurer tax collector, Dan McAllister. We issued a letter to the governor saying, hey, we need to be able to provide some relief measures on the local level. Please allow us to do that. On Saturday, there was some movement. The governor issued a statement basically saying that on the local level, we had the authority to provide some relief. We couldn't change the date that the property taxes were due, but there was some flexibility there. From there, the California Association of Counties did some review of the law. They also concluded that we could provide relief on the local level. So we've gone back again to our treasurer tax collector and asked for proactive relief. As business people, we cannot sit back and accept that our property taxes are going to come into default on Friday. Why? When you go into default, you immediately are assessed a 10% penalty on that tax bill. On top of that, come July, an 18% interest rate on that tax bill. So that's a significant amount of money. So our push yesterday was to come up with a proposal that we sent back over into the hands of our treasurer tax collector. So the proposal I actually brought forward, again, contacted Supervisor Jim Desmond. He was on board. The Restaurant Association helped broker a letter, helped broker a relief plan that's been done elsewhere. Now, what this basically does is it says, hey, look, there's a variety of people who know they're not going to be able to make that second installment. They need to communicate that today, before Friday, before those taxes become delinquent, to our tax collector. When they do, they are able to enter into a payment plan. They would basically put 20% down by Friday, so that it's a down payment on that tax bill. There would be a $26 setup fee to enter into a payment plan. The penalty fee of 10% would not be assessed at all. And the 18% interest that's normally charged would be cut into half to 9. You would have a 4-year period to pay that tax bill, which would spread it out in smaller chunks. You could pay it off sooner than that. The only problem comes in if you fall into default for one of your payments. At that point in time, it would be appropriate to assess back the penalty fees. Now, this sounded like a much better plan to me than what some of our other counties were offering. You may have seen the news yesterday. Other counties were saying, hey, we're not able to move the date that the property taxes are due, but what we can do is go ahead and communicate with you now. You won't be assessed that penalty fee. We're going to put an army of people together that are going to sit outside that assessor's office and work with you. And if you come see us by the second week of May, for example, you will not be charged that penalty fee. We have to put pressure on our local Dan McAllister treasurer tax collector to do something proactive instead of waiting for people to come into default come Friday. Yesterday, there was just an incredible effort on the part of several associations locally, including the Association of Realtors, the Restaurant Association, all of our chambers, and they really flooded the office with letters asking for this relief. So just a word that we have to keep the pressure on. I'm very concerned if individuals in our community go into default with their taxes come Friday. But again, really proud of our business community coming together. It's going to take that level of collaboration, close communication. Now is a better time than ever to get to know and understand your local elected officials. You're really missing out if you have not communicated with them. Please don't assume we're still busy. And on a final note, I want to talk about the collaboration that's existing right now between local, state, and federal leaders. Really happy to have a bit of a reprieve from the typical division that's existed at all sorts of levels of government. You see interesting people working together that ordinarily might not be political friends, but they're doing so for the benefit of the community, and that's been a nice reprieve for all concerned. So I would say that on the local level, you have leaders that are playing kindly in the sandbox together, and that's to your benefit. And we need to continue to encourage, compliment, and appreciate our leaders for working well together. And as this continues on, we have to keep that intact because so much is needed. It's a coordinated effort, local, state, and federal. That's how we're going to get out of this mess. And that's how we're going to rebuild our economy post-pandemic. So I'm available for any questions. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. Please know my office, open for business. I'm here to help and support you. RJ can provide all of my contact information should you need help and support moving forward. Thanks.
Super. Thank you, Supervisor Kristen Gaspar. That was terrific. As always, one of my favorite Kristen stories is and as I mentioned, she is one of our favorites. We had her speaking for a Wealth Legacy Group puts on something called Hot Topics for Business Owners. And so I always like to have an elected official with us to speak to some of the issues of the community and also how people can get involved. So we asked Kristen to come and speak, and I said, okay, Kristen, you've got 10 minutes. That's it. You no more, not a penny more. And at the end of 10 minutes, she smiled at me and then basically turned her back on me and just kept going because she knew better than I did that there was more important things also that needed to be addressed. And so while I wanted to cheerfully throttle her, I also appreciated this is a remarkable leader who has a passion for serving. And so, Kristen, thanks so much for being with us. Folks, if you've got questions, type them into your chat box. We will, time permitting today, go ahead and get to those. So everybody's on mute, but you can go ahead and chat us your question. And let's see if I can get us to the next where we want to go, and that's with very great friend Brian Jones. So I'm going to bring Brian's information up on the screen at the same time, just do a quick little bio for him as well. Brian was elected in 2018 to serve the people of California's 38th Senate District. Now, prior to serving in the Senate, Brian was a Santee City Council member for 8 years and the representative for the 71st California Assembly District from 2010 to 2016. The scars have started to heal, Brian. I noticed that the scars from that experience healed. Now you're in the Senate, where somehow I think they might be worse. Now, I didn't know this about you, this next part. In addition to serving, prior to serving the legislature, Brian was the associate pastor at Sunrise Community Church out in Santee. I didn't know that. That doesn't surprise me that you live a life of commitment to service and serving your Lord Jesus. So that doesn't surprise me. But you've also held a commercial real estate license since 2005. You are a very proud San Diego Aztec grad with a business major. And in the 37 minutes that you have for fun at 3 in the morning, probably, you can likely catch Brian and his kids or friends out on a mountain bikes or on a motorcycle. So even when he's not on a bike, Brian has climbed some pretty tall hills, fighting for the tax-loving colleagues in the Assembly and now the Senate, fighting for the benefits of the individual taxpayers, and trying to get the avaricial aspects of Sacramento in abeyance, and keeping more money back here in our communities. So Brian's been working on improving the economic development also for small businesses, which is why he's on our panel today, and also supporting our armed forces and veterans. Brian co-authored some very important legislation I want to give a shout out to, including the Made in America legislation, which makes it easier for manufacturers to do business in California. And also he's promoted legislation that helps our ever-expanding craft beer and beverage industry here in San Diego, among other places. So with that, please help me welcome State Senator and friend, Brian Jones.
Well, good morning, RJ and everybody. On regarding the mountain bike thing, it's going to be a couple of weeks before I'm back on my mountain bike. I'll show you. I've got my brace on. I broke my collarbone a week and a half ago mountain biking, so it'll be a while before I'm back. And I want to also really thank Kristen for opening up the panel. She did a great job. And one of the things that she said is, as elected officials, we are here, we are working. I'm actually in my district office in El Cajon this morning, working out of here. I've got one other staff member here today, so we are abiding by the social distancing and making sure that we're staying safe. I want to thank Congressman Peters for being here and really appreciate his bipartisan and often nonpartisan advocacy for San Diego County. I count him a colleague and a friend, and so it's good. RJ, you put together a good panel here. And I know for your viewers that this is a scary time. For those of us that own small, medium, and even large businesses, my wife and I both own small businesses. As you mentioned, I have a commercial real estate license. I'm not very active in that right now, but I do stay connected to my former partners and keep up on the industry and what's going on. My wife actually runs 2 businesses. She is a interior decorator, and then her and her stepdad run a grocery. They're in the grocery business. They're part of the supply chain in that they are brokers, manufacturer brokers into the health food grocery stores. So like Kristen, my wife and I are both part of the essential business lineup. The two of my kids that live at home work for Costco, so they're both part of that essential business as well. And I share that with you for a couple of reasons. Number one, we're going a little stir crazy, but fortunately, we all four have legitimate reasons to leave the home and get out. And we have 2 Rhodesian Ridgeback dogs that need to be walked every once in a while, so we're out with them. But and I'll get into it a little bit more here. We also are a part of the effects of where we are in America right now by being small business owners. We're feeling this pinch as well. Things have changed in the last 6 weeks. I'm an optimist, and so my default is to always try to hang in there and be patient and look for opportunities. I think that's one of the things that makes America great, and the entrepreneurial spirit of business owners in America is, even when we're faced with trying times like this, I think a lot of us put on our thinking caps and say, okay, what's going to change, and how do we take advantage of those changes and come out of this, maybe not immediately better off, but eventually better off by taking advantage of the changes. So the Great Recession 2008 showed us a little bit of the challenges, but also the opportunities with the drastic changing marketplace. It doesn't always work out, but at least we know we gave it our all. Today, I hope to share some of my thoughts, and also, RJ, really, my focus this morning is I want to hear what's going on as a state legislator. Unlike Kristen, who's on the front line with the county medical director, the county board of supervisors, and mayors, as legislators, our role is a little bit different in that, as we process through this, we're more reactionary in that what are we going to do at the state level once this is a little bit more defined, and how do we make sure that the state moving forward is responsive to the needs of our constituents. And so that's really why I'm here this morning, is to listen to what's going on. It will help me as a fellow business owner. Also, my role as a representative of East and North San Diego County in the Senate. And I understand many of us are blaming our government's reaction to the coronavirus as the reason our businesses are struggling, withering, or even in the most saddest cases might even have to close, and those business owners completely redefine what they do when they get back. And you're right, many of the steps that the federal, state, and local governments have taken to combat the coronavirus have directly undercut or killed your business. Many of those steps by the government, I personally don't agree with, which is why I'm happy to get into the discussion about the loss of our freedoms and our liberties. And right now we need to focus on how to keep our businesses afloat and viable for the future. The first thing I want everybody that I can recommend is don't panic. This is a trying time, but panic certainly isn't going to make it better. Figure out your bottom line, and if possible, do what you need to do to have your business survive. And that's what we're doing, my wife and I. Second, many of you may recall a famous quote by Ronald Reagan: "The 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help." Well, President Reagan was right back in 1986 when he said it, and is still primarily right today. However, I also believe that President Reagan would tell us, as business owners, we shouldn't look a gift horse in the mouth. Because of the strong pro-business philosophy of our current President Donald Trump and the majority in the U.S. Senate, the federal government has responded to our concerns with several emergency pro-business loans, reductions in regulations, and extensions of deadlines. I strongly encourage you to look to these programs. You have paid taxes all your life, employed a great many people, and greatly contributed to our community. And third and finally, the full weight of the federal, state, and local governments are available really to assist you and your businesses. And finally, before we get into the questions and answers, I want all of you to know that my office and staff are available to assist you, your businesses, and your employees as we try to survive the coronavirus. RJ does have my contact information. I'll share it here. The office phone number here in El Cajon is 619-596-3136. The website is senate.ca.gov/Jones. And on my website, we've recently put up a bunch of resources that are dedicated to dealing with the coronavirus, including with the links for assistance for businesses and their workers. And we're on the phones every day. My staff right now are really, we've restructured a lot of my staff's responsibilities to now be focusing on individual concerns regarding employment, regarding business survival, and getting our economy back going. I'm also on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram at SEN Brian Jones, Senate Brian Jones. And you can email me directly at senator.jones@sen.ca.gov. And for your viewers and participants, RJ, you know, one of the focuses I'm really concerned about and really spending a lot of personal time studying and trying to understand is, you know, in these times of trial and concern in our country is our constitutional rights, and, you know, making sure that the limitations that the Constitution puts on our government are abided by, and that we as the people are the ones that are driving the bus here and making sure that our government is responsive to us as citizens. With that,
super.
You tell me what's next.
Okay, well, we're going to do this. We'll put you on pause, and we'll bring Scott on. And then, folks, again, if you've got questions for Kristen and Brian and Scott, please go into your chat bar and type them in, and time permitting, we'll be able to address those. In fact, you know, again, the things that you learn, I went out this morning dutifully wearing a mask early this morning, and Brian asked me, how come you wore a mask? I'm just curious. And I said, well, I thought that's what we were supposed to do. And Brian explained to me that, well, no, unless you're going into the store or where you're going to be with people and you can't keep that social distancing, that's when you wear a mask. And that made great sense. I mean, there's a lot of confusion, and that's just one small example about confusion over many different things. That's why it's important to reach out to your legislators and ask questions from small to big. And that we can't expect them to read our minds. They're smart people, they're caring people, they're committed to service, but they're not mind readers. And so, as my wife reminds me as well, you know, again, that's what communication is all about. We need to be talking with each other and asking questions so we can learn and help one another. Well, I'm going to pivot over now and go to Scott and get my slide up for Scott. And let me do a quick introduction as well. And Scott, I've not had the pleasure of getting to meet you yet personally, but I sure hope we, as a result or after today, that we'll have a chance to do that. Congressman Scott Peters serves the California's 52nd Congressional District, which includes the cities of Coronado, Poway, and most of northern San Diego. So there's an overlap there with Kristen as well. First elected in 2012, Scott currently serves on both the House Budget Committee and the House Energy and Commerce Committee. So as you might guess, those are really important committee assignments, and as a result, Scott's a strong advocate of the critical importance of investment in ongoing and fundamental scientific research, which is so important to our San Diego community here. As well, he supports the military's goals to enhance their energy security, and also is fighting for common sense. That's a word that sometimes doesn't get associated with Congress or the elected officials, but Scott is really fighting for common sense healthcare reforms that work both for families and for the business community and small business owners. You know, Scott's been ranked the fourth most independent Democrat in Congress by the National Journal, and there's a couple hundred Democrats just in the House. And so to be the fourth most independent, he recognizes the challenges that face business owners and individuals to take innovation and they take patience, and it also takes bipartisan solutions and reaching across party lines to build consensus and to get things done. So with that, please help me welcome Congressman Scott Peters.
Thank you very much, RJ. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you just fine.
Okay, super. I had some problems connecting, but thanks for having me. I guess that we're facing two big problems here, big challenges here. One is a healthcare challenge. We want to make sure that we handle this pandemic in a way that minimizes the disruption to our healthcare community and saves lives. And then we've got a tremendous follow-on economic challenge, which is a huge problem. And Congress has been dealing with both. So let me just talk about the three bills we've done so far. One, we did a bill right off the bat to help fund the Centers for Disease Control, the FDA, and to make sure that the federal infrastructure was ready to deal with these challenges, which are so big in scope. Then we did another bill to make sure that we provided economic incentives for people to do the right thing, which is if you don't feel well, we want you to be able to go to work, not to go to work without feeling economic pressure. We provided some leave for folks for 2 weeks, and then if you've got to take care of your kid because he or she has a school closing, they will be able to stay home and you'll be able to be paid for that. We'll reimburse the employer for that. And then we also want to make sure that if you had to get a test, if your doctor said you needed a test, you would be able to get that test and not have to worry about paying for it. So no co-pays, even if you're not insured, the federal government would pick up the cost of that test, because if you need a test, we don't want economics to be an inhibition. The healthcare challenge is really up to a lot of us to do the right thing, as RJ was just saying, as you were saying, RJ. Maintain your social distance, wash your hands, and so forth. And the local governments, including the county where Kristen works, are doing a great job of coordinating with the healthcare system. The federal government's main role with respect to healthcare is getting stuff to them. So we want to provide masks, test kits, and I think the federal government has been a little bit slow, but is responding quickly, and we're hoping that testing will be up and going in particular, because before we can go back to work, we're going to have a robust testing protocol that lets everyone know it's okay and safe to return to work. So on the healthcare side, we're providing over $100 billion just to catch up with that. One of the things that the federal government did recently locally was, you may have seen that Palomar Hospital, the old Palomar Hospital, opened up a 250-bed hospital. We provided some of the resources for that. But the big thing we're focusing on is on the economic impacts. So we have done a few things to respond to that. Direct payments, keeping people on the payroll, and then unemployment insurance. Let me take those one by one, and then we'll have time for questions. First of all, there's a lot of consensus, Republican and Democrats, that we have to get money back into the economy, that to buffer the economic impact of this and keep it a recession and not a depression. We want to make sure that people's pockets aren't completely bare. So one of the things that people will be seeing is direct payments. We heard from the Treasury Department that those will start going out the week of the 13th, I guess next week. If you make $75,000 or less, according to your 2018 or 2019 tax returns, adjusted gross income, you'll get a payment of $1,200, $500 per kid, $1,200 for your spouse. You'll get a little bit smaller payments as your income goes up to $100,000. Over that, you won't get direct payments, but that puts money into people's pockets directly and quickly. Second, we're trying to make sure that small businesses in particular can keep people on the payroll. We don't want people to lose their jobs. So we provided there's an emergency loan fund through the Small Business Administration, and there's a payroll protection plan loan system through your existing bank that will provide loans to you. If you keep people on the payroll, those loans can be converted to grants, and you won't have to pay them back. So there's a tremendous amount of money behind them. I think the Senate's talking about putting another $250 billion into them. That money is intended not to run out, so there shouldn't be a race. There are implementation issues with that. Some of the banks have questions about that. That's in the Treasury Department now. And the call we have after this actually is with Secretary Mnuchin to try to get him to help us make sure that we have all this money, we want to get it into the economy, that the paperwork and so forth is there so that banks feel comfortable making those loans. And then finally, for people who aren't on the payroll, or for people who are small businesses, super small businesses, sole proprietorships, maybe the person who cuts your hair, there's additional money for unemployment insurance that's gone to the states. So the states will have money to do this. They're actually having a hard time catching up with answering the phone, but that's, again, a short-term problem. But also, people will be eligible for this who haven't usually been eligible for unemployment. So, like I said, small proprietors and even business owners who haven't actually been employees will be able to qualify for this money. Going forward, my caucus, which is the New Dems caucus, we're the sort of pro-growth Democrats. We would like to see the next bill build in automatic triggers so that if the conditions persist or even worsen, we won't have to go back to Congress every 2 weeks, every 2 months to figure out what the next package is. We'd like to build in metrics so that if these persist, that money will automatically go, and people will have confidence that they don't have to rely on everyone getting together in Washington and making the next bill, that those will actually be done automatically. We think that would help calm people down. And certainty, we know, is also a very important part of people's confidence in making investments in the future. We're talking a lot about the logistics of getting back to Congress. I mean, all of us are all over the country. We're in our home districts. Our staffs are working remotely, like we're doing here. They're working very hard to make sure that we hear from you and understand what our next challenge is and how to make this better. It's not a matter of getting agreement on the money. I think all the advice we've gotten is that in times like this, it's better to go big. Republicans and Democrats in Washington and the president, I think, all agree on that. But we have issues with making sure that all this money can get into the economy quickly, and I think that's our focus right now. Finally, I just say that in our community, tourism industry is a big part of the economy, along with the military, science and technology, and trade. Tourism has been hit particularly hard. I'm allied with representatives from Las Vegas, Orlando, other tourism cities to make sure that that sector gets the help it needs. We have some businesses that are over 500 employees, but just over 500 employees in the tourism industry. We're trying to make sure that those folks can get help as well. RJ, I suppose that's probably enough for now, and I'm happy to take questions. But again, thanks for the opportunity to talk. I would just say, if you want to reach me and you're in the 52nd district, which is Coronado to Poway and sort of most of northern San Diego, scott.peters@mail.house.gov is the best way, or 858-455-5550. But the email gets a little bit quicker attention these days. Thanks, RJ.
Joe, helps if I turn my mute button off.
Okay.
So thank you very much, Congressman Peters. Great stuff. We've got a few questions that have come in, so let me go to those. And one of the questions had to do with Kristen. It was about the property tax. So I'll read this. Julie asks, it sounds like the property tax relief is still working on getting approved. How would a homeowner find out if the plans that you've talked about, in fact, get approved for homeowner relief or property tax relief? And is there a chance that there'll be an answer on that by this Friday? Okay, Kristen, are you still with us?
Kristen is not any longer now.
Okay, well, so That's the challenges of having folks that have about 10 different places they need to be at the same time. So thanks, Daniel, for letting me know that. And we'll see about getting an answer to that question. So Daniel, before we finish up with today, maybe we can look at getting that Q&A or that question from Julie sent over to Kristen. There was also another question that had to do about the recording from yesterday's presentation on technology as to whether that has already been sent out to the participants. And if you want a copy of any of our presentations, either yesterday's on technology, Monday's very exciting messages on how to take back control in these difficult and challenging times, and including the SEAL team. What do you do when you're in the middle of a crisis and fighting against almost overwhelming odds? How do you take back control? And so we've got some great content from our 3 speakers on Monday. And likely you may want to have a recording from today as well. Just send an email to me at rj@wealthlegacygroup.com here on your screen, and we'll respond back and get you a link to that YouTube or also SoundCloud. So Scott, I'll have a question to you, and that is, what do you think right now that you're finding that people are most concerned about, or perhaps maybe they don't understand that something that from a benefit standpoint, you mentioned just a moment ago the Paycheck Protection Plan that is $350 billion, $349 billion, with another proposed $250 billion. That's a great example of there's more coming than people are even aware of. But are you finding some misconceptions on the parts of constituents that you want to do a shout out to and say, hey, just want you to know about this? And if so, what would that be?
You hear me now? Sorry about that.
Now, yep, now we can hear you. Sure.
So the administration was using a thermometer to show that they were getting this money out the door, and the thermometer was going up and up and up. And a lot of small businesses were taking that as an indication that the money was running out. I want them to know that there is a consensus in Washington that we will provide the amount of money we need, and particularly to keep people on the payroll. We don't, we want unemployment insurance to be available. We don't want people to go into that. If we can keep them on the payroll, recovery will be so much faster. So what I want small businesses to know is that, look, let your banker get through this paperwork. I hope you'll have a bank that will be interested in doing this, but we're getting a lot of questions from banks. Once they get through the paperwork, that money should be there. There's an incentive to keep people on the payroll, and that money can be forgiven if you do. So I want you to know, don't worry about that, the notion it's going to run out. The other thing, by the way, parenthetically, if you happen to be a customer of Wells Fargo, they got into some regulatory difficulty and had a cap put on them. We've asked the Treasury Department to look at that and have the regulators let Wells Fargo loan a little bit more money, because Wells Fargo, Bank of America, some of these bigger banks are more able to deal with the paperwork than some of the smaller community banks. Now, we'd like Wells Fargo to be unshackled for this purpose as well.
Correct. My understanding is that they were given only about $10 billion to work with, which I say only, but that's when you look at $349 billion, that's a small slice. And we had a number of people yesterday reaching out to us to ask for additional lenders. So I'm pleased to hear that. That's a great one. Brian, if you could respond on a question we have coming in that, is there a smarter way, and I think that this is a perhaps leading question here, but can we do things in a smarter way instead of locking down the entire communities as we have? I was, in fact, just reading an article yesterday from Dr. James Doty, from Chapman University, who is one of the leading economists here actually in the country. And that was his point exactly, is that the economic costs of shutting down our whole system, our GDP, we may not have flattened the curve, but we have sure flattened the economy.
Sure.
Do you have some thoughts on that in terms of both where you see us going from here and when you think we're going to get back
Well,
to
I've
work?
been actually RJ, that's a question I've been kind of contemplating ever since. Let's see, we went on, the legislature went on recess on March 16th. And, and I've been contemplating that ever since then. As I shared earlier, on a constitutional level, we're really at this point in time, in my opinion, testing the intersection of what our government can do in an emergency situation and the constraints that the Constitution puts on our federal government and our local governments. So I've been really looking at that. Here's the bottom, and I've been patient with it. I've been purposefully not publicly critical of any particular elected official who's responding to this crisis, especially from the president to the governor to the local mayors, I want to compliment Governor Newsom and President Trump, both working well together on this issue. The mayors working well with the governor and the president on this. This is unique. We haven't ever had this situation in our modern times where the government is expected to react to a pandemic and potential epidemic. So as we're going through this process, I think it's incumbent upon all of us elected officials to make sure that we are not taking the position that everything we're doing right now is and forever will be the right thing to do. We need to be contemplative about, okay, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? And I think there's going to be a lot of lessons learned out of this process. And I agree with what I am picking up as the premise from the questioner. In my opinion, I think we have overreacted a little bit. I think the government in some cases has gone a little bit too far. And we need to start, releasing those restrictions where we have gone too far. But we need to be smart about it. We can't just come in and blanketly open things. We've got to be systematic about it.
Super. Thank you, Brian. And we've got just a couple more, we've got just a few more minutes left, and we have a few more questions that are coming in. And that either one of you gentlemen take this one, if you would, about the question of time frame for the economic assistance loans from SBA being reviewed and dispersed. Now, we will be talking about that tomorrow on our program from 9 to 10. We've got SBA lenders and others that will be talking about the economic assistance emergency loans. But if you guys want to do a quick flyby on that one, anybody want to chime in on? I think I would actually, let's just do this. Let's defer, because there's a couple other questions I think will be more broad reaching. Let's defer that one till tomorrow, but we will talk about that in terms of both economic assistance loans, some of the micro loans, and the time frames for getting those approved.
RJ, if it's okay, I just say,
sure, Scott.
That's a focus of ours to make sure that we get those things out there. Again, there's sort of paperwork, loan forms and so forth that the government's generating. We want that to happen as soon as possible. But and I want to say also, but I got to get on another call, but I really appreciate you doing this and getting information out to small businesses. It's really important. And if we can be helpful to you, I hope you'll be in touch with us directly. Thank you.
Super. Thank you, Congressman Peters. We sure appreciate having you with us. So thank you for your service. Well, we've got a few more questions coming in. Let's see. Brian, if you want to tackle any of these things, any comments on the fact that I was struck by reading or going online last night and reading some articles about President Trump is praising the efforts of our governor here, who they've not exactly been on speaking terms, and yet President Trump
they're on speaking terms. They've always been on speaking terms.
Yes. So any thoughts on that? Also, he was quite complimentary of the governor of New York for obviously one of the epicenters of what's happening. And Scott is certainly demonstrated the ability to cross lines and go across parties. Are we seeing more a conciliatory nature coming out of this? And is that something we could hope for going forward?
Well, I think, RJ, that's the great thing about America is in a time of peacetime and relevant comfort is when we have our ideological debates. But in times of threat is when Americans come together and work and do our best work together. And so we saw it after 9/11. We saw it in the Obama administration when they took down Osama bin Laden. We saw it again in the Bush administration with Katrina, and in the Trump administration, last year and the years before with the hurricanes on the East Coast and the firestorms here on the West Coast. So I think we would all be genuinely disappointed if our elected leaders didn't work together in these times of crisis. And I will say that, I think personally, Governor Newsom has done a pretty good job on this. He seems to be certainly taking it serious, which he does in all these instances of the firestorms and floods and everything else that he's had to deal with since he's become governor. Now on the peculiar thing to me about all this, and we're seeing it at the national level, we're seeing it at the state level, is in these times of crisis is when all of a sudden all of these regulations that we've allowed the bureaucrat state and the regulators to put onto us, all of a sudden the elected officials wake up and say, oh, hey, maybe we don't need this regulation or we don't need that regulation. I wish that we could come to a consensus in our times of comfort to realize that a lot of these regulations are overreached by the bureaucrat state and we need to undo them. But the good news is a lot of that stuff is properly being evaluated at this point in time. A lot of those regulations are being properly suspended or undone so that people can get to work, get their work done. One of the things that the Republicans in Sacramento are putting pressure on Governor Newsom and his administration right now is to suspend AB 5, which is the independent contractor law that went into effect last year, which obviously I'm sure impacts a lot of your viewers and folks here on the call. So I am going to remain optimistic that we can get some movement on that, but also realistic that the intense pressure that he's getting from the labor unions on that AB 5 might prevent him from being able to do anything on it. So, but we're going to keep pushing it and we're going to keep working on it. And there's pressure from, other parts of the economy too on him to do some reforms on that.
Now, that has been disastrous legislation, and so hopefully that can be dealt with. And we'll be talking more about that as well on Friday as we hit into the economy and what can we expect going forward on the new reality of what our economy is going to look like. The good news, I'll give you a little taste. We're probably going to have a V recession rather than a U or an L. By V, meaning that the U.S. economy is very, very sound. It's just right now when you don't have 10 million people losing their jobs or more, it's kind of tough to have an engine firing on all cylinders. Brian, we just have a couple more quick questions. And before we go to those, I just want to remind our listeners that if you have a question, for example, someone was asking for a summary of the contact information of how to get in touch with Congressman Peters or our Brian Jones here, our State Senator Brian Jones, or Supervisor Kristen Gaspar, send an email to us at the office and we'll get that information out to you. So again, rj@wealthlegacygroup.com. And also just want to encourage you to say thank you to our elected officials, whomever that might be. Just send them a note. Just send them an email to thank them. I'm sure they will fall over in a dead faint. But it's so nice to hear someone who says, look, I don't always agree with you, but I appreciate the job that you're getting done. And along that lines, I also want to thank our friends at Home Street Bank who will be with us tomorrow, talking more about some of the different programs for the business owners. Pacific Life, who's been a sponsor of this program. I personally have a Pacific Life contract, and Pacific Life is more than just about dying. Actually, what I have with Pacific Life is more for long-term care as well as for growing money in a tax-advantaged way. good friends over at Vistage. Vistage is a remarkable peer-to-peer networking group for business owners, 25,000 members in Vistage. There's a number of great peer-to-peer groups, but none better than Vistage. And here locally, Dale Robinette is a dear friend and a master chair for Vistage, as well as a best practices chair. So if you're a business owner and you want to have some other folks that you're speaking into your life and to connect with, let's get you connected with Vistage. And then also City National Rockdale, who will be with us on Friday, one of the leading banks for business owners, but also a vaunted investment platform also. So they'll be with us on Friday. So thanks to all of our financial sponsors. Brian, what have we learned from this pandemic, if anything? And what if my dear friend Candace, whose dad is a physician, is asking this question, how would we address a future pandemic? Do you think we've learned anything from this one that we can apply to the next one? Because there likely will be something coming.
Absolutely. I think there's lots of lessons being learned. I will let you know that the governor's office sends out a daily update to all the legislators on what's happening across the state regarding testing, regarding how many people are testing positive, how many people have succumbed to this particular disease. So I think the government generally right now, in my opinion, is doing more right than wrong. And the few things that we are doing wrong, if there is another pandemic like this, we will have a better reaction to that type of pandemic. Again, back to the creativity of Americans and the American spirit. Even we've never faced a pandemic in modern times. It's been almost 100 years since we've had something like this. So we're reacting on a daily basis, trying it out on a daily basis. I think the president has certainly acknowledged, I think the governor's acknowledged that maybe we clamped down on the economy a little too hard. So we need to figure out how to get that going again. And I'm hopeful that that's what will happen. Personally, I think we've clamped down a little bit too hard on people's personal freedom to move about in our parks and beaches and such like that. And I'm having those conversations with the leaders that are in charge of that to make sure that we're properly evaluating, was all of that necessary? So yeah, there's a lot of lessons learned. Hopefully we don't have to face this again, hopefully in the near future or anytime soon. But if we do, we will certainly have those lessons learned and have even a more improved response plan next time.
Great, Brian, thanks for that. And I was listening to a fascinating interview with retired Fed Chair Bernanke, who was the chair during the 2008 recession. And one of the greatest lessons they learned, and also our new Fed Chair, Jay Powell, commented on that one of the reasons why the recession was so deep and so long in 2008, which actually began in 2007 and lasted for 15 months, is because the Fed did not step in quickly. They waited on the sidelines and were trying to not give money to somebody who didn't deserve it. They were trying to finesse it. And unfortunately, it created really a fiasco. But now, because this is what's referred to as an event-driven recession as opposed to a systematic recession that we had in 2008, meaning that the systems were broken, the banks were broken. But in this case, we don't have a broken system. Hospital and probably healthcare, we're seeing it stretched to the limit. So perhaps one could make an argument that there is some brokenness there. But the underlying economic engine of America is extremely solid and sound. So one of the things the Fed learned is that they've come in with all guns blazing, which is why they've brought $4 trillion to the business communities and to the being able to help support, undergird our economy. So likewise, I think we're going to learn some great lessons about how we handled this pandemic. The University of Washington's research, which has been really sort of the guiding stone, the touchstone of many federal as well as state choices about going and trying to flatten the curve by keeping everybody inside. Now we're seeing that research from the University of Washington, which, sorry to say that, I'm a kid from Washington State University, so I'm, of course, on the other side of them. But I have been concerned about the fact that we've been relying on that study as far as what we should be doing, and it's been showing to be remarkably incorrect, which has led to us being at home for as long as we are. So again, the thing to do is for us to come together, to ask questions of one another, to politely challenge. We can learn to agree disagreeably, as the saying goes, but pull together and find ways of solutions. In the meantime, I need to put the pause and invite you to come back tomorrow button. I just want to remind you, at Wealth Legacy Group, yes, we work with clients in all aspects of their wealth, whether it's advising, whether it's helping to pass for generations. But it's all also about legacy. And the fact is, we are all leaving a legacy, every one of us. It doesn't matter how badly we may have blown it last week, last month, last year. What matters is today. We're given a fresh new day. That's why they call it the present. Is to find a way that we can care not only for the people that we love and that we're in relationship with, our families and friends, but also for those people that are less fortunate than us. And to that end, we've been inviting this week for folks to make a contribution. If this has been helpful for you, if this seminar series has been helpful, we would ask you to let others know about it and invite them to come. But as well, won't you please make a donation to San Diego Food Bank? The San Diego Food Bank is a remarkable organization, and we've already been able to raise, through this webinar series and the generosity of our listeners, over 6,000 meals that we're going to be able to provide. Now, in San Diego, 1 in 5 San Diegans are food insecure, which means that they don't know where the next meal is coming from. 1 out of 5 in San Diego. Now, as startling a statistic as that is, many are children that normally just get their 1 meal a day that they can count on when they're in school. But because they're not in school, many of the children in this community are really struggling. So that's why we, more than ever, need to support the San Diego Food Bank. They can provide a meal. They can provide 3 meals for $1. It's extraordinary. So please, you've got a link to the San Diego Food Bank. We'd love to know that you've made a donation just so we can keep track of it. And our goal is to get 15,000 meals raised back through the San Diego Food Bank by the end of our series this Friday. So with that, I'm sorry, there's more questions coming in. We're just going to have to cut it for here today. Please, though, send us your questions. I will forward them to the appropriate legislative leaders here. And this is RJ Kelly with Wealth Legacy Group. We're so glad that you've been with us. Go and make a difference. We are going to get through this, as Brian just said a moment ago. We are going to get through this together as a country, stronger than ever. So with that, God bless you. Take good care. Be safe. And make a difference in the lives of others.